Welcome to Heartspeak Podcast, episode 37, Sensing the Earth's Mysteries. I just recently returned from a wonderful weekend in Sedona, Arizona, the Red Country, with a group of great friends, and we enjoyed going to the various vortices, energy centers of this magnificent old town. I say old not in because of its buildings, because it's meant to be part of ancient Lemuria going back into the thousands with its peak around 45,000 years ago. So Lemuria is part of what Sedona's magic's about. It is so ancient, and it's the land that's ancient. And this is what I want to talk about today, about whether or not the earth is here to serve us, or whether we're here to serve and enjoy the earth. And maybe if I just put this a little bit into perspective, the earth was created about 4.5 billion years ago. And the first life, and again this would have been extremely early life, was about 400 billion years ago. But if we want to bring it into a slightly newer history, we saw the dinosaurs appearing 250 million years ago, and the first mammals about 200 million years ago. Billions. And then, guess where man came? 200,000 years ago. So we're very new, 200,000 to 4.5 billion. I laugh when people say we're here to guard Mother Earth, or we're here to cooperate and look after her and save her. She's been around a lot longer than we have. And I think there have been many a time where she's shaken herself like a dog, and we've just been fleas on her back that have been shaken off. There are many indigenous stories about different groups that were here before us. And we certainly, in some traditions, we're seen as the fifth root race, the fifth group, the Aryan group. And that is really saying that there have been 4 other civilizations before who have disappeared, or the earth has gone through tremendous transformations and meant that we've had to conform or transform ourselves so we can live with these transformations. So these sacred sites may not go back 200,000 years, but they certainly, or even certainly 4.5 billion. But what we are looking at is how do we tap into the mysteries that come from the earth, recognizing that maybe our predecessors didn't necessarily build their sacred sites primarily for humanity to have an experience, but they may have built them in order to reflect heaven on earth. There are many sites around the world which are said to have built in correspondence to looking up at the Milky Way at night, seeing the dark rift, the dark area, and then building their temples, their sacred sites around a river to signify their understanding of heaven on earth. This is true of the sites around the Boyne Valley, New Grange, Louth. It's certainly true of the Nile. It's certainly true of other sites where you see the water flowing through, and then there are the sites. So it's not surprising that our ancient brothers and sisters looked up into the skies. They didn't have televisions and they didn't have anything else. So they looked and they said, wow, if we've come from that place, and many cultures believe they've come from the cosmos, our star people who have entered into this earth, then maybe we are here to construct our buildings so that it's as if, as I say, heaven and earth have come together. And when we enter these spaces, it's to enter into them with that wide awareness. It's as if someone's created a film for you, or a theatre, and you're walking in and you are becoming one of the actors on this land, acting out this relationship between the earth are going around the sun, and then the sun as part of the galaxy, and then if you want to go further, the galaxy as part of the universe, and the universe is part of the multi-universes or multiverses. Recognizing that we are a very small part of that. And you might say, well, what does it matter? Well, it feels that a lot of what I see is a reminder of our relationship with our cosmic self, or you might want to say our spiritual self, to remember who we are. That when we're in these places, we're reenacting this relationship, and it's wakening up inside us the truth of our spirituality, the truth of our nature, and we're then embodying it here on earth. So let's just maybe tell you a little bit more about myself. I love sacred sites, as you have probably heard from my podcasts. I believe there were magic in stones and trees. I can still see myself as a 5-year-old going, standing on a stone and thinking that was going to bring magic, or looking for the little people. It wasn't necessarily something my family talked about, but I believed it. I believed the woods, the forests were full of life, much of which I couldn't physically see with my eyes, but I could sense. And it's that sensing that feels that we've lost some of that, especially as we found ourselves in buildings and maybe on an iPad or iPhone. We've lost that unique sensing that can't come from a video or can't come from reading something. It is energetic, and it's energetic. And for many of us, we may feel that as energy. I can walk into a sacred site or amongst the mountains or vortices of Sedona. I can feel the different energies. For instance, there's a wonderful rock there called Bell Rock, which is shaped like a woman. And there's no doubt to me that there's a very strong magnetic energy there, pulling me in. Magnets pull you into her. And that's why I think she's more female, because feminine energy is magnetic. I was walking around Bell Rock and I could feel myself literally having my feet pulled into the earth, like as if there was a strong magnet in the earth. And I was literally leaning and knowing I couldn't fall over because of the pull of the magnet. Whereas when I went up to the site which is known as the airport vortices, it's more electrical to me. I feel excited, I feel energized, I don't feel held into the earth. I feel I want, oh, what should I go and do? That's more masculine energy. And the beautiful thing about Sedona is they have built the road now like a serpent road, and they've made it a very quiet road, which is wonderful. And you watch the serpent move between Bell Rock and the airport, the balance of the masculine and feminine. And if you then have the courage and the strength to climb up Cathedral Rock, you'll feel as you stand up on the ledge, between these very tall rock stone people, that you're having that balance between masculine and feminine, beautifully done. And so this is why I love going to these places. Now, not only do I feel the energy, and if you've never felt energy, it sometimes is in my hand, sometimes it's in my nose, a bit above my lip, and sometimes it's in my hair, stands on end. And you're really sensing, is this a different energy than I felt before? That, in other words, it's not right or wrong. It may be cold, it may be hot, it may be intense, it may be soft, it may be cuddly. So you're learning how to use your body as a dowsing rod, as a pendulum. How do you feel in this area? And we felt that very much as we were walking around Bell Rock, my friend and I. We were feeling just the different energies. That 1 minute there was this feeling of deep connection into the earth, and then there was another feeling of being fed with energy, and then the next minute it was a little cold. We both said, oh no, we seem to have lost the energy, let's go back to where we were. And then I may see visions, and those visions are not those that you are, oh, let me see, I don't know, an indigenous person, let me see this, it's in those soft eyes that you have, those eyes where you, at the corner of your eye, you see something. I often find that it's useful for me to act as if I'm a child, which isn't too difficult, but go there in a joyous way. without expectations, without conditions. Oh, I'm going to heal the planet. Just go and enjoy. And then the visions may come to you. Sometimes you see the visions in the rock. That's not uncommon. I see the image of something, an elephant or a snake, or I see the image of a person. But remember, what you see is often a reflection of you. So if you see an elephant, it isn't that there's an elephant in the rock, but it may be. But what does that mean to you? Well, how's it affecting you? What does it do to your energy to imagine that, to see that? So everything that we are seeing is a reflection of ourselves, not just our human self, but our divine self. So if you see an image of a god or a goddess, then it's reflecting back to you as well. Then you may hear things. I often hear words. We went to the wonderful Boynton Canyon. And there in Boynton Canyon, to me, it's a real place of communication with the other dimensions. It's interesting as you walk into Boynton and just to go up to the Kachina rock, so it's just the first piece, the vista, you go through this area where there is a dry bed, a dry riverbed, and it's so quiet. And you may say, I can't hear anything, but it is because it's so quiet, it's always noisy. You know that feeling? And many times where there is that stillness, there is an interdimensional doorway, there's a portal. And it's almost as if that energy is reading you, it's like a sense of, it's sensing you and saying, who are you? And should I allow you to come here? And of course, it's always important when you go to any sacred site to ask for permission to go there and ask for permission to enter a sacred site silently. But there's always a guardian of a site, whether you can see it or not. It may be a stone, it may be a tree, or it may be the little people are guarding that area. Always important to us. But as we moved on into Boynton, or moved up towards the vista, the Kachina Rock, I was kind of fascinated because I could hear all this chattering going on. And it certainly wasn't me and it wasn't my mind. And this time it was very amusing because I was carrying my handbag, my purse, and I had a few things in it. And literally I could feel these small energies, these small beings coming and taking things out of my bag, saying, what's this? What's this? What's this? And they said, are you still using a cell phone? I said, yes. They said, oh, that's strange. But it was very amusing to listen to their voices. And I've heard that before. When I'm in a playful place, I'll often hear the little people talk to me in ways that doesn't exist when I go, okay, tell me what you see. Tell me now. So this was interesting. And then as I climbed higher, I could hear different levels of wisdom coming through. And what I needed to make sure I did was to quiet my own inner chatter. Like, what am I doing? What are they saying? So the quieter we can become, the more clear the voice is. And you sometimes find that you're given an answer and you didn't even ask the question. It certainly happened recently when I was up at Castle Hill, the South Island of New Zealand. I was up at the very top where the seeker of wisdom and the keeper of wisdom were both there. And I got answers that I hadn't asked questions for, but they both made sense. So just being able to be still, and for some people, if you've got an active mind like mine, that means not necessarily sitting and meditating. You may well get answers that way. But when I'm walking around a site, I may get an answer by seeing a butterfly, or I may see a tree in a certain form, or I may see something telling me something that makes sense to me. I remember going to Findhorn, some of you may know this place, it's in the north of Scotland, beautiful sacred place. And again, not necessarily sacred because people have built stone circles there, but the hills are sacred and the land is sacred and the trees are. And I remember working in the garden there at Findhorn, and the gardener was saying, these trees that we've made into a bush or a hedge keep needing to be cut down because they all try to be individuals and we want them to be a hedge. And I thought, you're talking to me. I want to be an individual tree. I don't want to be cut down and be a hedge. So sometimes the messages we get come from those sorts of sources, something that just reflects for us a truth inside ourselves. So I've spoken about listening, spoken about seeing, feeling, and of course there's another type of feeling, a feeling of emotion. You may go to a sacred site and you feel emotional. You may feel sad, you may feel happy, you may feel that you might get angry. And again, it may be triggering something inside you, or you may be picking up the energy of the area itself. I've certainly been to places where there have been wars or sacrifices, or destruction, and have felt the sadness or the loss of those people as they died. Now, I'm not asking you to go and fix that, but if you want to, just understand that that isn't the Earth's energy. It's like where we have laid down a layer of dust on top of her with all our emotions, all our beliefs. And the best thing we can do is to go to these places and take back what we need to take back. So if you go to a place and you feel sad, recognize maybe it's connecting to something sad inside you, and then take it with you. Imagine yourself in a shower, wash the energy away, or go into a bath or in an ocean. In other words, take the energy of a piece of land and ask that it should be cleansed, not in that place, but somewhere away from that place where there is flowing water or the ability to actually clear the energy. So sacred sites are very important to me, and there are two different types as I'm describing. There are those which we have built at some point, and many times we build them on top of each other, so it's not just that one site. And then there are the ones that are natural, mountains, trees, caves, wells, and they are as wonderful as the ones that have been man-made. Places like New Zealand have very few man-made sites, but the whole land is sacred, as is Ireland. It has a mixture of the two. In places like Peru, the land has been fashioned. The rocks often have been carved to create something, but it's not that they've used stone from outside that place. Very clever. And so when we're at sacred sites, I want you to recognize, as I've said, this isn't about us. Many times when I go to a place and someone says, oh, they found bones in this place, and they say, this must be a burial place for humans. It's like, well, no. If someone died many years ago and I was looking for somewhere to bury this person, I might put them in this cave. It didn't mean that that was why the cave was built. And we have real problems because of carbon dating. So we cannot carbon date anything that hasn't got something organic within it. So it's wonderful if they've got something organic, they can say, I can date this, but truly, the majority of things cannot be dated. And therefore, just because you found, I don't know, a piece of food or a piece of cloth dating to a certain time, that wasn't necessarily the origins of this building. And to be clear, many of the buildings, such as the places such as New Grange and Stonehenge, and many of the sites on places like Malta, are all about 5,000, 6,000 years old, very old. And they are built in such a specific way to show the relationship between the cosmos and ourselves. So take somewhere like New Grange, which is the most beautiful site there in just north of Dublin, and it really has a beautiful cover to it, and then a passageway, and then 3 chambers at the end. And it's often called a tomb passageway or tomb chamber. I would rather call it a womb chamber, because what happens is that on the 21st of December, around that time, because it's Northern Hemisphere, the new sun penetrates that passageway, sends the rays of sun down, and lights up the 3 chambers at the end, where you could imagine you might have seeds there, but it's actually where the earth is dormant, waiting for the new sun. So it isn't empty, it's full of energy that's waiting for the sun's rays to fertilize it, to bring it into life. And it's what we do. We're fertilizing an egg, the sperm and the egg. But it's also what we have inside us. We sometimes feel excited, but we can't get things moving until that moment we go, okay, I'm going to do it now. But to me, places like New Grange were built long before humans needed that energy from a particular place. It wasn't when we were going to walk in there and be lit up. These places, and similar as I say, the places of Gozo, were built as a female figure. And when the sun or Venus or the Pleiades or the moon struck this chamber, and many a time it was a chamber through a hole into crystals, it opened up a place where now you literally fertilize new consciousness, and you conceive new consciousness, I should say, so that that new consciousness could then spread out. And it would either spread out in the earth energy beneath it, and I've talked about the grid system or the dragon system that runs throughout the earth. And so when the idea and the spark that lit the idea came together, a new consciousness was formed, and that spread out throughout the world along these grid systems. In other places, they are built by water, and that's very common, or even had a moat around them. So water is the transformer, it is the changer, it carries information, it's like liquid crystal. And so when this new consciousness was formed, it entered into the water then went into the rivers, the streams, the oceans, and at some point you might drink that. So you experience new consciousness in your body. So sacred sites have the magical place of not only being close or aligned to the cosmos, but they also are often positioned on top of energy lines. Now, the more superficial energy lines are called ley lines. You may have heard of those. They run often in a serpentine-like way, and they're like the etheric body of our own physical form. But the dragon energy, or the grid energy, just moves across the planet in waves, you could put it. And it's very slow moving, and it also will find places which are round, such as mountains, such as wells, such as caves. And because it's a serpentine energy, it will curve around the inside of that cave, of that mountain, and make that mountain cave a very powerful place of consciousness. So this is a little bit like your eggs holding a new consciousness. Each of a woman's eggs holds the perfect blueprint for what could become, the potential. And all that egg is waiting for is the sperm which will bring that potential alive. In a similar way, the mountain will be affected. It's holding the potential of consciousness. And when the sun strikes or lightning strikes, that consciousness is brought alive, and it will then affect all the people who live around that mountain or that lake or whatever. And that is something I learned when I was in New York, just how powerful rivers, lakes, mountains are, and that they affect how we live rather than we affect how they live. So even in different areas where there are mountains, a village that is near one type of mountain, even made by different form, maybe limestone rather than granite, will have a different consciousness than the people who live around a different form mountain. Fascinating, fascinating. So mountains gather consciousness and are often awakened by, as I say, lightning or sun. Another way of bringing rich, abundant consciousness into your world is what the ancient farmers did. They would put a standing stone, a tall stone, in the center of their field, or they would plant trees in a circle. And what would happen is, because it's a stick, the serpent would wind around it, or the dragon serpent energy would wind around it and stay in that area. So the same thing happens if you go to a sacred tree and someone says this is a sacred tree. It's because the roots go into the earth and the serpent energy has stayed around this tree, making it very powerful. So I would like you to be able to become as excited as I am by sacred sites. And one way of doing it is Get out of your way of believing that we have to save the world, as they say, or become guardians of it, or the world is offering us a choice to understand our cosmic self, our beautiful spiritual self. So in some sites, they are aligned to the seasons. And the ancient people would then perform rituals or ceremonies at that particular season, reenacting the relationship maybe with the sun and the moon, or with the sun and its relationship to the galaxy. So that it wasn't about them just, oh, I don't know, acting out a marriage ceremony. In acting it out, they were honoring the greater picture, the greater interaction. So the more we honor the lunar cycles or the solar cycles, whatever you want to honor, the more you are literally bringing that energy into your body and opening yourself up to your relationship with the cosmos. You're a child of the cosmos. That's what we're meant to be doing now. It isn't about floating out, I have to tell you, and saying, okay, I don't belong on this earth. It's about bringing it down onto this earth, bringing what you are, bringing your cosmic knowledge, your spiritual knowledge here on earth. And when you go to sacred sites, and they are not just in these places I've talked about, they're everywhere. And if you might say, well, I don't live near anything here, but do you live near a sacred tree, a river, a stream, a lake, a cave? Each of those places has a purpose here on earth. Each of those places can empower us to be able to go deeper within ourselves. And each of them, as I described in Sedona, has a different form. So when I'm at Bell Rock, I feel as if I'm being hugged and nurtured, and I have an inner strength. Whereas when I go to airport, I'm more excited. And when I go to Cathedral Rock, I feel balanced and ready to fly. And at Boynton, I feel I'm connected to many levels of communication. And it is for us to recognize the different messages that are coming through to us, to literally being sensitive to that world. Now, where do the little people come in? Just to complete this, most countries have mythology about little people who built the earth sometimes, little people who built buildings, but then they went to live within the earth. And I have no problem with believing that there may well be beings within the earth living there. There are many stories of people entering through a portal and disappearing, places like Shangri-La you may have heard of, where the person comes back, maybe they think 20 years later, but it's 200 years later, that they have never aged, but the land has. And so this idea of there being beings who live within the earth, I have no problem with. I also have no problem with understanding that there will be people on mountains, and perhaps that's a better relationship with Shangri-La. But this idea that there are beings who join us on this earth, who are living in different dimensions, but maybe within the same space, is a thrilling one. So that when you go to a sacred site, although I've said it's between you, having a relationship with you and yourself, the cosmos, you may also pick up that there are beings who are not of this time zone and not of what we call past. They may be people of the future. They may not even be people who believe that they're living on Earth. They're having an experience with Earth's wonderful energy. So once again, be ready to meet those beings. This doesn't necessarily tie into that story, but there was a time when I was traveling near Saint-Born, which is in the south of France, and I was walking out through that magical forest there, and I was just enjoying the birds singing, and out of nowhere came, in my vision, my inner vision, this huge druid lady. And you might say, well, how did you know druid? I knew. And she said to me, what are you doing here in my forest? And I said, sorry that we didn't ask for permission from you. We didn't know you were here. She said, that's okay. And I asked her about Mary Magdalene. And I said, do you know Mary Magdalene? And she just said, yes, of course. I said, did she live here? They said, no. They said, she passed through here. And I thanked her for her information and I passed on. But when I received that type of information, I know I'm onto something real here. That it wouldn't have been what I necessarily would have thought was the answer. So when you are learning to sense the earth, go without expectations and be playful. Say to the little people, I want to come and play with you. I want to have fun with you. And they may well show themselves through the moving of a piece of leaf, or maybe the water runs in a different way. If you are good with, you can walk along the ocean, you often find that when you say to the ocean, oh, come and play with me, it literally will. The wave will just come up to your feet and then disappear again. So it's a magical place for us to be. I just want to finish with, I've talked about sacred sites. You don't have to go to a sacred site to be getting in touch with Earth's mysteries, as I explained. But I also want you to perhaps go without reading everything before you go there. Much of what we read or we learn about these sacred sites comes from a relatively new mythology. That new mythology is something maybe just 1,000 years old, if that, maybe 2,000. And the historians who wrote it, and they may have only written it maybe the last 200 years, were writing it from their perspective. So when I look at what an archaeologist may say, or what I read from a historian, I'm taking it not with a pinch of salt, but I'm recognizing that what they see and how they're seeing this site is very much in reflection to their belief system. And I just honor that because it truly is a value. But this site is probably, is much older than our history books. And when I go back into many of the indigenous history, it's very interesting to note, such as we always think that they were barbarians back there and now we're all civilized. Well, in fact, many sites talk about the presence of weaponry and sacrifice only being there around 900 BCE, that it wasn't there more than 3,000 years ago. And in fact, they have found wonderful objects like the wonderful Great Mother figure from Kaplıgü in Turkey, which is 8,000 years old. And it shows that when she was buried 8,000 years ago, there was no evidence of weaponry or sacrifice. So those things seem to have come into being only in the last 3,000 years. And so when I go to a site, I like to talk to stones, because what I find is the stones are like a video camera. They've just been sitting there for ages and ages. They are the stone people if you wish to go down that road with me. But when I'm with a stone, I lean against it or I put my hand against it and I hum, because humming brings the stones out. So I hum and then I ask with great humbleness, could you please tell me about the history of this place? And I get images, I get words, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't have got that from a book, but why not ask the video recorder that's sitting there about its world? And some of the stones have been displaced, they've been thrown aside, and I ask them, how does that feel? And they say, well, it's nice that you've communicated with me. Very nice to have someone to talk to. So when you go out, whether it is to any sacred site in the world, please go as that child with your senses open. Be playful around water, be playful around trees, be honoring around rocks. And if you are at a sacred site, recognize that sometimes the archaeologists have built it back not in the way that it originally was. So be mindful of, okay, this was someone else's impression of how this should be, but I'm going to sense inside how I should treat this site and what it was built for. Well, I hope I've opened your eyes and your heart to many new ideas as you move around our world. Please understand that we are here to enjoy everything about this planet. We're very lucky to be here, and together we can build another world where there is truly heaven on earth. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Heart Speak podcast with Dr. Christine Page. Remember to check out other episodes in the podcast archive section on www.christinepage.com. And do share with friends, family, and colleagues. Join us next time for another edition of Heart Speak.